Okay, so let's talk about mold and my story with mold and how it all started. So my little family, we moved into a rental apartment in Utah. And I mentioned on the location just so that we're in a desert, it's dry here. A lot of people think that if you live in a dry state, mold is not an issue. Well, we lived there for a few years, and what I've noticed is that whenever we would go traveling, and we did travel quite a bit, where we would be gone for several months and then come back, that my symptoms would improve when I would be gone, and then when I would come back, all of a sudden I would have I had like a skin rash under my armpit. All of a sudden, like, I started not sleeping well, and just all kind of different symptoms would start happening. And I also was telling my husband, oh, it kind of smells musty in this place. And it was an old apartment complex. He couldn't smell it though. So mold was kind of already on my radar because I did hear it on some podcast mentioned. But also at the same time, you think the most logical thing that most of us would think, well, if you go away, and when we would go away, we would go be in nature, and just it would be a different kind of lifestyle. So that was my first kind of like solution and answer to this, and to say, well, perhaps it's because I'm more relaxed, it's more like a vacation, I'm spending more time in nature, different things like that. And so I would really work hard on, stress management and meditation and different things, which were helpful, but not really. So it was frustrating, but you always say, or at least that's what I told myself, that I need to work harder on this and that. I need to eat more clean. I need to meditate longer, or do this or do that. And it wasn't until, an event that happened that really changed everything for our family. And that was that there was a mushroom, like literally a mushroom growing from the carpet, from the wall in the corner. And of course that was a shock, because I saw it and I did not recognize it at first. I thought like that it was something that my daughter stuck in there, or like looked like a piece of pasta or something. And then I realized that it was a mushroom, and of course I called the apartment management people, and then also there was the whole drama of dealing with management, and how do you manage mold, and how it's not dealt with correctly. And so the apartment management person came over, and they looked everywhere. We lived in a lowest unit, so we had a crawl space underneath. So he went under there, and he said that he saw nothing. Like, I was imagining that it would be like all moldy or something. I thought it would be like a scene from The Last of Us or whatever, about mushrooms. But he said there was nothing. He had a gun to measure humidity in the material in the walls, and he said, well, it was slightly elevated, but he said he was not concerned. I knew there was a problem, so I started pressing him, and I told him we have to cut open the wall where the mushroom was. He was hesitant, but after talking to the owner of the apartment complex, he agreed on it, and he cut open the wall, and here it is. Everything was covered in black mold, and the wood was decaying. There was a very tiny leak in the pipe. it was essentially the wall was on the other side. There was kitchen sink, and so and that was the pipe that was leaking, and very tiny leak. Like there were no signs of mold on the outside. Later, I recognized that there was like some paint that was chipping off, and you could recognize. If you know what you're looking for, you would be able to tell. But if it wasn't for that mushroom, we would be probably living still there, not knowing. I would still be trying to get after all these other things and not understanding that it was mold that was affecting me. And from that point, you know, we just kind of had to evacuate in a way, move out, throw away a lot of things. I was debating what to do about it, and you know, landlord, or you know, the owner of the apartments refused to test and pay for testing of the mold to know what kind of mold that was. That whole conversation with him was really unpleasant because you know, there was a lot of downplaying of the issue, and there was no compensation for us, as I had to. Actually, my husband was on a work trip. He was out of the country, and it was me and my daughter. And all of a sudden, I was like, I did not know what to do. And I actually did make a poor decision, because back then I just did not know the protocol. Like, what do you do about mold? And so we actually, after they opened the wall, we stayed in the apartment and we spent the night there. And the apartment management brought the heater to dry the area out. And so that heater was running, and essentially it was circulating all the spores. Now everything, all of this is open and circulating. And that was a dumb decision to spend the night there, because in the morning we woke up and I just felt it in my eyes, throbbing eyes. And I looked at my daughter, her eyes were more red too. And at that point I was like, we have to be out of here immediately. And so I contacted family members, asked if we can, you know, stay at their house, and blah, blah, blah. We just started moving out. Luckily, we did have help, and it's a challenging situation. And if you have been in this kind of situation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've shared about it on Instagram, and some of you messaged me and told me your stories, and it's never pretty, you know, because I called the Utah office. They have actually a department that is all about mold, and they were like understanding, but they also said there are no laws to protect renters, or, you know, in this kind of situation. So there is not much to be done. Anyways, and luckily we had help. We had where to move out. But I know a lot of people, they don't have that kind of possibility. It's hard to find other places to rent. And if you're owning the place, that's even harder, because now you're facing remediation costs, and how do you deal with that? So mold is such a difficult issue, because not only it affects your body, but it also affects your safe place, you know, your house. And so that makes mold illness very challenging to deal with. And then mold is a multi-systemic issue, because it really affects so many parts of your body, of your health. And also it's hard to find practitioners that know how to deal with it. Mold mycotoxins are extremely damaging to mitochondria. Mitochondria are those powerhouses of the cell that are responsible for producing energy. Well, if you don't have that energy, that currency to run different processes in your body, of course you will be dealing with a number of different symptoms. And most definitely in conventional medicine, mold illness is not recognized, but you can find functional integrative medicine practitioners that are specializing in mold illness. And I've definitely been on a long journey of recovery, and it's not a linear process by any means. It's more like a twisty line. You progress and then you digress, and there are a lot of things to untwist, and it takes a long time. So that whole thing happened over a year ago now, and we moved out, and now my energy is back, and I would say that for the most part I am doing great. But there are some things that I'm still working on. Like, to say that I am 100%, I am not. I'm still working on my gut health, and tweaking and changing different things in how I'm doing things, because also there is a thing about mold, is that the entire family might be affected by it, but not everybody would react to mold illness the same. In fact, I was impacted by mold illness, but not my husband. My husband was doing just fine. He couldn't smell it. He was not dealing with all the symptoms that I was dealing with. Why? Why is that? Well, a lot of things go into this. The biggest thing is all the previous symptoms that I've been dealing with for over a decade, and I've mentioned in my previous video that I've been already dealing with like gut issues, and I've been dealing with fatigue. So my health was already compromised. There were already things out of balance, and so to say, I had this favorable my defenses were down, and my terrain was favorable for mycotoxins to create more damage. My body was not detoxifying very well. Also, I have specific gene polymorphisms that sometimes can put you at disadvantage. And so the combination of all these different things is why I dealt with all the symptoms that come from mold illness, but not my husband. My daughter a little bit, because of course she also inherited some of my genes, but I would say that I was definitely got it the worst of everybody else. And that makes it challenging too, because a lot of people question mold illness. If you're that canary in the coal mine, you're the only person that is dealing with the symptoms, but not the other people. It makes you feel like a crazy person again. It makes you feel like it's all in your head, and so on. Other things that came from mold illness were sensitivity to chemicals, to different fragrances. So if you're like a super sensitive person, that's another thing that is associated with mold illness oftentimes. And flares in seasonal allergies. Your immune system just becomes more reactive, more food sensitivities, not being able to eat certain foods. And I definitely had to eliminate, and I'm still eating gluten-free and dairy-free, and of course no processed foods, very little sugar, and all of that kind of went into management and maintenance of my gut health. So that is a little bit about how that happened with the mold journey. And also to add to that, I would say that this was not the first exposure to mold. I definitely learned a lot. I read different books, I attended webinars and forums specifically on mold illness. So I know quite a bit about mold illness right now, and I didn't at a time. I would have made better decisions right away when it happened if I did. But also, I know that I had other mold exposures in the past. We lived in Bellingham, Washington when I was pregnant with my daughter. And again, it was an old rental place, and it's very humid there. And we had visible mold. And it was smelling musty. And, you know, back then I thought, well, mold, whatever, not a big deal. Everybody has mold. It's humid. There is mold outside. There is mold inside. And I did not think twice about it. And perhaps I will actually make a separate video on my whole pregnancy and how that went. And I think that's actually a big connection to why I had so many complications in my pregnancy. And I actually developed a very rare condition during my pregnancy called polyhydramnios. And I am 95% certain that mold definitely played a role in part in that, and how everything went down during that time. That's a little bit about my mold journey and encounter, and I will share in a separate video what helped me recover from mold.